Hey, just a heads up that the following content may be disturbing or triggering for some listeners and is not appropriate for children. Please take care of yourself and others who may be listening with you. Welcome to the Bonus Babies Podcast, a show that has no easy answers, only hard questions.
More than anything, I tried to listen to them, and I know there were times I can see myself. We were sitting on the stairs as one of the little girls was telling me, and after she told me what had happened to her, I said, "What would you like to do now?" And she said, "I'd like to go take a bath." And so, I guess that's one of the things, because they have felt dirty and they want to take a bath to be clean. Once she started taking the bath, I fall apart and I'm the one crying. I don't want her to see, but it does break your heart. It is not easy to hear and see and feel their pain.
Can you tell me what you call the kids who you've cared for over the years?
We feel that the children that we receive coming into our home are bonuses. So we call them bonus babies.
I love that. This is your host, Jayne Amelia Larson, and I'm a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate volunteer for youth in foster care. Yeah, I know it's a mouthful. In the same way a CASA works, I explore all things in the foster care maze by talking to kids, parents, caregivers, attorneys, social workers, therapists, really anybody and everybody who will speak to me to keep the conversation open and the information flowing about all things CASA.
Hi, this is Jake Eberly, the producer of the Bonus Babies podcast, and you're about to hear Jayne Amelia speak with Deena Murray. Deena Murray is an astounding woman. She and her husband fostered 25 youth and adopted 12 of them, and she homeschooled all of them. And even with all that, she's the director and producer of VIP events for RCDL Enterprises, and her latest venture is working with MillionKids.org, helping support families and youth who are victims of sex trafficking. What she's doing is nothing short of extraordinary.
So I am here with Deena Murray. Hello, Deena. Hi.
Hi, Jayne Amelia.
Hey, thanks so much for doing this. And I heard about you, and now I've gotten to know you a little bit, and I'm so super impressed. But I want to hear from you. Who are you? Tell me, who are you?
Who am I? Good question. Well, I am a mom. I am a wife. I am a worker bee, and I have been in the as a foster parent for many, many, many years. That's why I call myself a parent. Mm-hmm. And we, over the many years, have fostered almost 30 children throughout Southern California.
All in Southern California, but you're in Arkansas now, right?
We moved to Arkansas this year in 2021.
Okay, so tell me about your husband. Like, I know you're special. Like, what is he like?
He's pretty special. He's probably the most patient person you will ever meet. The kids all look at him as just being, he's trustworthy, ethical, all of those things. It's amazing.
And he's not pretending any of that. He is that way.
Ever since we actually met when we were, for the first time, I think it was about 9, and he was about 9, and did not even remember. We had mutual family friends, found a photo after we were married, and he was in it.
Wow. So you've known each other since you were little kids. That's great.
Yes.
And you married young?
No, actually married in our later 20s. So his brother ended up dating one of my roommates. And so that's how we became friends again.
And then you found each other. Wow.
Found each other.
So I know you have a lot of faith in God, and you were married for a little while, and then you had an epiphany. Tell me about that.
Well, things had changed for us with our denomination, and we looked at each other and we said, we have all of this love. We don't have children. What are we going to do with it? How do we share it? And we didn't have an answer. And one day he came home from work and he said, "Hey, as I was driving, I heard a commercial for a foster agency in the Southern California area. What do you think about becoming foster parents?" And we kind of looked at each other and said, "Hey, why not? We both love kids. Let's do it."
So did you know anything about what it entailed, or what it was going to be like? Or?
We had no idea.
Ignorance is bliss, right? Yeah.
It completely is. We had no idea. And I think we kind of went into it thinking that kids will always reunify and, it's just a temporary thing and you're just there to help. And that's kind of, besides the fact we wanted to keep siblings together, that's what we went into it with.
I see. So you wanted sibling sets, right? Which is so valuable because kids often get separated. And so they have the first trauma of being removed from their bio home, from their mom and dad, and then they get separated again.
Exactly. And we just figured we had the space, we had the heart, and we wanted to do it.
But apparently you had the stamina too, because you have a long history of it. But all right, so you had training. What was training like? It wasn't that long, right?
No, I think it was probably 4 months, because you have to go through the process, of course, of being approved by your background check and all of that.
Right, and your home has to be approved, and there's a little bit of training, right, too, as well.
I don't remember any of it. I just think it was all, it was whatever we did, we did. I don't really remember a whole lot of it.
Yeah, and then you had your training, and then bam, what happened?
They called us and they said, we have 3 siblings. Is that okay with you? And we said, absolutely, bring them on. And it was a little girl and 2 little boys, all siblings. And I think she was probably about 4, and then he was about 3, and then the youngest little boy was 12 months old. So
wow, so you had a baby too.
We had a baby too. Talk about going from 0 to family and then having a baby in there, and no experience at all with that. I'm thankful they entrusted us with these kids.
Who did you ask to for help? I mean, did you have family near you, or were your parents around, or anybody?
Both sets of parents were around, but also because we went through an agency, they send someone to the home every week versus if you go direct with the county. And that was a real lifeline, having someone come every week and check on us. And if we had questions, we could call them.
Mm-hmm. So you felt you had support. And so tell me about those kids, because they were with you for a little while.
They stayed with us for a year, and we got to know their birth mom. The judge at one point said, hey, would you be interested in adopting? And we said, whatever is meant to be. And for the mom, the birth mom, that was the motivation she needed to get her life in gear, when it hit her that she could lose her kids. So she went through what she needed to do, the rehab and the parenting classes.
The programs. So, and those kids, you said that they even kind of looked like you, and like they could have been your kids, right?
Yes. The names that the kids had were names that we would have chosen if we had had our own kids. There was never a guess about it. People just assumed they were ours. They looked a lot like us. Their personalities fit with us. So it was actually that first set of 3 that we had for the 1 year was very easy.
Right. And then you had a week off, right?
It was a week or 2. And then
what happened?
We get the phone call. Hey, we have 4 siblings. Would you be interested?
Wow.
So we jumped from 3 to 4. Now that wasn't as bad as going from 0 to 3. But with the 4, the oldest was a little girl, and then 3 younger brothers.
Right. And she had a lot of responsibility, right? She was like the little mom. And
she was used to being the one who was there for her brothers, raising them. So that presented a set of challenges when you're talking about a child who's been parentified, and she feels very responsible, and you're trying to be the parent in there, and she's, feeling that responsibility. So that was a little bit tough. We worked with her on that, hey, you're a kid, it's okay to be a kid. And it took her a while.
Right. And one of the little boys had a hard time too, right?
We have found that little boys that are 3, 4, 5 years old, when they don't feel they've been protected by their birth mom or mom, they just really, really struggle with anger. There's a lot of anger. And so we went through with him. At first, everything was fine, like it is the honeymoon period that you get in foster. And then he started with me, and it was funny because my husband never saw it. So at the beginning, he would spit on me, he would punch me, he would hit me, and
He was furious.
he
Right.
was just angry, so angry. And my husband would be like, "Oh, there's no way. He's such a sweetie. He's so cute." And he was, but he definitely had anger. And it wasn't until one day he lashed out at my husband that we were like, oh, my husband finally said, "Oh, okay, now I get." And that took about a year and a half to finally get that to, as we worked through, we would just hug him and say, "No matter what you do, we're going to love you anyway." And I always went back to one of the Proverbs, which is a soft word turns away wrath. And that was the only thing that would pop into my head every time is he's angry, understandably, soft word. Don't get mad back. Just love on him.
The soft word turns away wrath. What does it say that again?
A soft word turns away wrath.
Wow, yeah. Yeah, so when you say you just loved on him, so you just kept on giving him the soft word.
And holding him and hugging him. Of course, some of that he didn't realize was to keep him from hitting me. So when you hold him against your body, it's a lot harder to do damage. But he just really, really, really struggled.
Right, and they were with you a long time too, right?
They were with us. They say 3.5 years. I thought it was closer to 2.5, 3 years. But again, we had a great relationship with the extended family, with the birth mom, with the grandma, with the aunts. It was generational foster care. Every generation for a number of generations had been put into Child Protective Services. So
That's very common. Yeah, very common.
It's tough because that's all they know. I mean, they sometimes don't know any different. It was pretty normal for them. But we developed a relationship with all of them, a very close relationship to this day. And I was saying all 4 of the kids live in Missouri, which is just north of Arkansas. So we got to see all of them just this year. I think it was this year. And spent time with their mom, with all of them. As a matter of fact, they invited us up for Thanksgiving to spend time with them. And I think we were part of the influence that broke the cycle. None of their kids have gone into foster care. And so after all these generations,
wow, that is a powerful impact.
And we love them, they're part of our family. They call us aunt and uncle, completely part of our family.
And so after them, well, you almost took them in again, right? You almost adopted them or took them into guardianship. What was that?
Yes. Well, the judge again, or the social worker came to us and said, "Would you want to adopt them?" And we said, this was probably about the 2-year plus mark, said, their mom has done so well. She had been through the programs and the treatment programs and everything. So it wasn't a matter of her not doing what was asked of her. She just didn't have a place for them to live. And so we went back to the social worker and said, we don't feel that's right when the mom has done everything you've asked of her. What about legal guardianship? Would that work? And so they said, well, yeah. And we said, what does that mean? How easy is it at the end for her to get the kids back if you do guardianship? Well, as we're doing this whole back and forth, the mom found a place to live and was able to. It was Thanksgiving Day, probably our hardest Thanksgiving day. The kids were reunified with her. We left just bawling because these kids have been part of our life for so long.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden it's an empty house again, right?
Back to an empty house. Now we were tired. So at that point, yeah, so it was very emotional each time and I've heard other people say, I could never be a foster parent because of that loss at the end when you give them back. But the other side of it for us, at least, was we knew, kids should be with their parents, their birth parents, as much as possible. And so for us, there was joy in the fact that they could be reunified And even though we cried and there was loss, but there was, it was mixed with the joy.
Right. And you kept on doing it then, right? I mean, you didn't say, okay, that's enough. We did it for 7 years now or whatever. Like, we're done. But no, that didn't happen?
No, it didn't happen. So we decided we were going to take a little break. We went on a mini vacation. And while we were on the vacation, we get the phone call. We have 6 siblings who need a home.
6?
Well, and that was only part of the group that was placed. Some of the other siblings were placed in other families, but we ended up taking 6 of them. And they were ages, at the time, they were about 6 to 2. And so they had been in one of the shelters for about a month. And they came to live with us 2 days before Christmas. And so we went Thanksgiving to 2 days before Christmas, trying to get ourselves acclimated again to life. And we met them a couple times at the shelter and they came home with us. That was a tough Christmas. Kids, they're traumatized. And we look at photos from that day and nobody's smiling. That was very difficult, especially a major holiday.
Did you feel that you got a lot of support from the caseworkers?
Yes, we did, both through the agency and through the county social workers.
Right, so you were double teamed because they have them at the agency because they were private agencies placing the kids as well as, and then it was followed up by the county.
Exactly, and we had some of the best. I just can't even imagine how they do their jobs with what they have to deal with, and trying to find homes for these kids, and it's not
trying
easy.
to find good homes too. I mean,
right.
That's a huge challenge.
They are. The county social workers, in my opinion, are very definitely overworked.
They most assuredly are. They have triple the cases that they should have. It's actually unconscionable. I can't believe the system in that regard. And this is part of the reason why I'm doing the podcast, is that the foster care system, as I see it in this country, is broken. And there's a lot of well-intentioned people trying to take care of kids and trying to put good systems in place. And yet they fail, often across the board.
It's tough because it's not an easy, there aren't any easy solutions.
Right, there's no easy fix. Yeah.
And so, you get, well, kids should stay with their birth parents. And I know from the 6 that we got, they have said to us at different times, that if we'd stayed with our birth parents, there's a good chance we would have died. Now, whether that's an exaggeration or not, they definitely would not have had a quality of life.
Right, but those kids also were really troubled, right? So tell me about them.
Well, there were all kinds of allegations made by the kids, including the fact they were molested, most likely. There were they were removed for neglect and abuse that was going on in the home. It was a pretty bad situation.
And a single mom, or was there also a guy involved?
It was mom and dad, birth parents.
Really?
Now, this was, he had kids living in the home from a previous wife as well. So but it was with the kids that came to live with us, it was their birth mom in the home.
All right, so then you had 6, but then you got even more, didn't you?
We did. So we get the phone call and, hey, we have a single, and the foster parent she was living with could no longer have her continue to live with them. Not sure what happened, but we got the call. She came to live with us. She was about 5 or 6 at the time. Sweet, sweet little girl. Then about, I'd say a year later or so, we had off and on in there, we'd do respite for other foster parents if needed or help out where we could. And we'd had 2 boys staying with us, and that wasn't working out with their foster mom. So the younger of the 2 came to live with us. And he actually, we have 3 kids that are all the same age, not all from 3 different families. Then about, I don't know, probably another couple years, it's like the time you have to remember through all of this, it's happening. And
it's all a blur. I know.
When we first got the 6, I just remember the oldest 2 were identical twins. And I just remember being so tired and not being able to figure out which was which. and not even caring for the first few weeks. It's like, whichever one you are, because I was so tired. I mean, obviously now I go, how in the world did how did I mix them up and not know who was who? But those first couple of weeks, I had no idea. But so, oh, go ahead. You were going to say something.
Well, I was going to say, so in the end, you've got how many kids? At that time, you got 9?
At that time, we had 9. And then we found out that he had, the 9th one was supposed to come just for the weekend. A week later, they said, can he stay another weekend? A week later, can he stay a little bit longer? They could not find a home. And we know that happens a lot, where it's challenging sometimes, where they cannot find a home for the children. So by that point, he was part of the family. And, when they said, would you mind keeping him? We were like, sure. You know what? He knows us. We know him. We seem like we're a good fit. Then we get the call that he has 3 siblings who are in foster care. And would we be interested in having them come stay with us? Well, we said conditionally yes, because we knew a little bit of their background. They were on different meds. 2 of them were, 2 out of the 3 were. There were some issues with what they were saying, ADD and ADHD and all of those, and misbehavior in school. We said yes, but we asked for it to be kind of a probationary period of time to make sure that it was going to work, knowing they had some serious behavior problems. So they stayed with us for a few months, and we said, yep, it looks like it's going to work under one condition. And we want to take them off all of their meds. And we want to take them off all of their meds because we want to see what we're dealing with. So, that's pretty brave, huh? Well, again, sometimes ignorance is bliss, because not knowing, we just didn't know what was going on. What was the reality versus they weren't conforming in a classroom. And so they were put on meds to make them, be quiet. More compliant. That's right. Exactly. Yeah. And we didn't know if that was it or what was going on. So under doctor's supervision, they went cold turkey. And the first night, the next day, the little boy came to us and said, that was the best sleep I've ever had. And we knew, because they were putting on uppers and downers and to try to regulate them. Well, it took a while, I think it's 30, 60 days or something for it to clean out of the system. But we liked the kids better without the meds. Their behaviors seemed more normal. They weren't catatonic. It was just, they had the real emotions started coming out. Yeah, because they were themselves and not all over-medicated. Right. There was no suppression. No suppression. Yeah, which I guess in a way, at least you see it. You see what's happening. So what happened? Well, again, anger. Lots of anger, lots and lots. Just tough on them again, because now all those feelings that had been in there for probably years that had been suppressed started to explode out. And we went through probably about a year and a half of them having to work through just battles of just that anger that they feel. Sometimes it got violent. Sometimes it was just screaming for hours. And, saying things like, I can't breathe, and just not knowing how to help them, but knowing they needed to work through it. Because I figured if they didn't do it at 5, they would be doing it at 25, and who knew how it would manifest itself at 25. Right. And you were homeschooling all these kids, right? At that point we were. So with our first 6. Okay. So were you crazy? I'm just saying. No. Okay, I don't see. Yeah, I don't see any medals behind you, and I know that. You must be bucking for sainthood. But anyway, go ahead. No, definitely not sainthood. With our first 6, we realized that when kids have been traumatized, so completely, it's difficult for them to sit in a classroom and pay attention and do the work. When you're worried about, are you going to be beaten up? 1 + 1 = 2 does not even register. So we started talking to social workers, and, as we went through the adoption process, we got to the point where we realized they weren't functioning. One of the boys spent almost his entire school year in the principal's office, and he loved it because it was a hive of activity, and he could be in the middle of it versus being in a classroom where he had to be quiet and pay attention. So we talked to, the social workers and everything about homeschooling, and they agreed. And we did that with each of the kids. And so by the time we had 12 and we had adopted all 12, we were homeschooling all 12. And I must say, I had a blast. I'm probably a closet teacher. I don't know. I probably should have been one. I loved it. We had so much fun. And it was, when you homeschool, you can make it much more interactive. You can make it much more geared toward them. And if the kid has...
But you were doing all different ages. So how did you even do that?
Well, you would separate for like math. They would do their own math. But some of it, reading time, we could do together. Science, we could do together for the most part. The older kids more hands-on, maybe, and the younger kids more assisting. But it didn't matter if they did their homework or schoolwork standing on their head. They didn't have to sit at a desk. We had one who just never sat still, and he was always a frog. Well, he could do his schoolwork that way. And with time and maturity, that lessened and lessened. But he wouldn't have had that freedom in a classroom.
No, of course not. So tell me about Joy.
Amy Joy.
Amy Joy.
Amy Joy. She was one of our last ones, and she was one of the ones who really struggled. And so with all of our kids, for the most part, we kept their original first name because they were used to being called by that. That was part of their identity. But we said, let's pick a middle name that is unique to you, and the older kids picked their own middle name. And with Amy, we said, hey, we're going to give you the middle name Joy, because even though we're going through a rough time right now, we know someday you are going to be full of joy. And she has turned out to be one of the kids with the best sense of humor. She is extremely joyful now. She's in college and loving life. She's doing so well.
So you gave her joy, even though that wasn't what she was about when she was first with you.
It definitely was not what she was about. But she is there now, and she loves her middle name now.
So, and a couple of those kids were very badly abused, you said, and it's hard to know exactly.
Well, because a lot of it was allegations, and I tend to believe that when young kids talk about what has happened to them, they're telling the truth. But when you're dealing with a court system, they need more than a 5-year-old or 4-year-old saying that somebody touched me. They need them to say it to a CASA advocate or someone, an attorney, somebody, as case worker. And the kids, we couldn't get the kids. They couldn't do it. They could not say it to a stranger. But within the home, they shared with us a lot of what had happened to them, especially the 6. The others, the next 6 were, for the most part, neglected more than probably anything. But the first 6, the stories they shared were pretty horrific.
Yeah, so how did you handle that for yourself, you and your husband? Because even if you have these huge hearts of love and wanting to love, but that's really hard to hear that. I know it's hard for me, even doing this podcast and doing my CASA work. Sometimes it's truly distressing. How did you deal with that?
More than anything, I tried to listen to them. And I know there were times I can see myself. We were sitting on the stairs as one of the little girls was telling me. And after she told me what had happened to her, I said, what would you like to do now? And she said, I'd like to go take a bath. And so, I guess that's one of the things, because they have felt dirty and they want to take a bath to be clean. Once she started taking the bath, I fall apart and I'm the one crying. I don't want her to see, but it does break your heart. It is not easy to hear and see and feel their pain.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, and 12 kids too, not even one or two. Just, it's amazing work that you and your husband did. And you said that you couldn't have done it without him.
Oh, absolutely not. I really admire single moms out there because there is no way. I don't care if it's one child, two children, these women, and even dads, single parents who are taking it all on by themselves, especially without a support system. I can say I'm so thankful that I've had someone that I could take a step back and he stepped in. I mean, he would take the kids camping by himself, all 12 of them up to the mountains, and they'd go camping and fishing, and he'd come back
Wow.
after, I know, a couple nights, and they would be filthy dirty, but some of the best stories. And I'd get a weekend off. And so I really appreciated him stepping up and being that, dad.
Yeah, and this whole time you're doing it, you have a career. You've got jobs. You're making a living. So is he. It isn't like you're hanging out at home only taking care of the kids, right?
Well, for the first part, he was working and I was home with him full time. And then we did a little bit of a trade where I was working more and he was home with him. But we did get a concession from social services. I think it was about the time we hit kid number 8 or so that we did not have to both be going to a job every day. We were able to work from the home. We were able to do what we were doing because they got that it really needed 2 people. I mean,
Right.
In some ways, we became a residential treatment center almost.
Yeah, of course, of course. You had said that some of the kids are still hurting as adults. That's just going to happen, right? Because if they as they age, they almost have to go through again what they processed as a little kid. They got to go through it again.
That's what we have found is that, when we put boundaries and a structure for them and we walked through all of this and they were in therapy and dealt with a lot of it, then they hit 18, 19, they go through the teen years and then they hit that 18, 19, 20. And what our experience is that a lot of them ended up having to go through it with that adult brain now. They had to redo it or they had to re-deal with it. And it was challenging for them as adults. And sometimes memories mingled, what happened before mingled with our story with them. Or, sometimes there were flashbacks, things they hadn't remembered would come back. And it's been definitely challenging.
Right, so you've moved to Arkansas because now you have a few kids still at home, but you have kids all around you in all the surrounding states. So you have this huge extended family.
We do. None of our kids lived in California any longer. So it didn't make sense for us to be the only ones there, and they all had to come. So a number of our kids are in Texas. We have Tennessee, Alabama. Of course, our second set of kids are up in Missouri. So we have quite a few kids around us now, or closer to us.
And then on top of all this, you hear about millionkids.org. You hear Opal speak. Opal Singleton. So tell me about that.
I had always, with a heart for children to begin with, and then hearing about how some of them were being exploited through human trafficking. Once the kids are all leaving, you go, what do you do with all that extra time? Because you're so used to being consumed by meals and, schoolwork and all of that. So I ended up, I had taken a trip to Thailand, a trip to Costa Rica for work, and had learned a little bit more about human trafficking. So when I was back here, it's like, what can I do? And I heard Opal Singleton from millionkids.org, like you said, speak. And for about a year, I kept thinking, I should ask her if she needs help. I should get involved because this is really a passion of mine to fight human trafficking. And about a year later, it took me a while, I called her and it just happened that she needed help And so I started out by volunteering with her and doing whatever she needed. And now as a contractor, I do some contract work for her or for Million Kids, putting together whatever they need, their marketing pieces, the website, different things. Her focus is education. And so I do more of the operations behind the scenes. But I have learned a ton about human trafficking and especially the impact on foster children.
Yes, it's a very vulnerable population, right? So, what does Million Kids actually do? I know it's education, it's really prevention, but it's a lot of it is just getting the word out, right?
It is. Opal for years, I think she's been doing this something like 12 years now. Her big thing is, or the Million Kids, is to educate as many people as possible. Now, she tackles it from the perspective of educating, government workers, social workers, police departments. She works with the Riverside County Anti-Human Trafficking Task Force.
Right, that's how I heard about her.
Okay,
yeah.
So that's at schools, colleges, all over. She teaches at USC, just up and down the state and across the nation, actually.
Across the nation.
She does. She educates. So that's the primary focus of Million Kids, is to educate as many people as possible about it, because so many of them aren't aware of things like sextortion, where a child is being blackmailed over a photo that they have sent to possibly a stranger who's now asking them for more and more explicit, and the child's being threatened.
Right. So in a case like that, it might be a kid that meets somebody in a chat room, like in a game room, and they don't know that it's not another 14-year-old kid, but it's like a 50-year-old guy.
Exactly. It could be a video game chat room. We find with boys in particular who can be very vulnerable to this. We find social media, and so kids, they're not thinking about predators. And somebody says, "Hey, you're beautiful," and "Oh, thank you." And the next thing you know, they're being convinced, because they think they're in a relationship possibly with this person. They're doing more than they should be doing, obviously.
Right. So they start texting, they send pictures, they think they're in a relationship or even a friendship, and then it can quickly turn into something else.
Exactly. I mean, we're seeing more and more. The FBI said, this is probably one of the biggest online threats to children, and most parents aren't even aware of it. So,
right. Give me an example of what, because I really want listeners to know that this is happening. This is real. This is happening right now.
Well, the big thing is when you're on social media and the internet, you can be anybody you want to. So like you said, so they'll use a fake photo. I know one case here, he said his name was Violet and he was a 14-year-old girl and he was reaching out. And the person on the other side doesn't know who they are, and they're trusting, they're young. Oftentimes, you're often talking 8, 9, 10 years old. And so the person says, "Hey, send that photo." They send that photo, the first one, and the first one may be somewhat innocent even. And then send me another photo. And in some cases, the perpetrator will actually send a photo too, to say, "See, everybody does it. It's normal." Sometimes they'll expose them to porn, because again, everybody does it. Starts to try to sexualize that child. And then it just keeps building and building, and then the threats will start to come in. I've seen cases where, the child will have received 1,000 text messages threatening them. "If you don't do this, we're going to tell everybody. We're going to tell your coach." Because, of course, with social media, they know who their parents are. They know who their friends are. They know if they belong to a religious group. They know what school they go to. And they tell them, "We're going to share this with everyone if you don't send us more."
Right, and they're using apps with location services, so they even sometimes know where the kids are, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Guys, all right. So, and now you're doing training for the Million Kids as well, with a particular insight. Tell me about that.
Well, I do workshops for foster parents, and for parents is one of them. I do an intro to human trafficking, but there's two that I do. One is for foster parents, or what all parents should know, and the other one is the danger zone, and it looks at the apps and social media and video games and what our kids are being exposed to. And with that, we know again who is vulnerable to it. And it's children whose boundaries have been knocked down. That's foster children. Children who are homeless, run away, have backgrounds of homelessness, running away. All of that. And you start looking at that and you see it's oftentimes foster children.
Right. So as you look back on the work that you've done, and when I say work, the love work, your vocation really, taking care of all these kids, bringing them into your home, loving on them, how do you feel about what you and your husband have done? How do you feel about that?
Well, there's been moments that we just said, why? This has been the hardest thing we ever did. Thankfully, when we walked into it, we had no idea what it would entail. So, but there's been moments where I've sat and I've cried and just said, if I knew then what I know now, would I do it again? And I don't know if I would have, just because of how hard it was. And then there's other times you sit there and you say, you know what, this is the best experience we've ever had in our lives. And I always think back to what we were told by our foster agency. They said, what you want to do is you want to give these kids a window into a different type of life. And so I always come back to that. Even in our darkest moments, our kids knew there was an alternative to what they had been brought up, into and under with their birth families. And even the ones who struggled, they will tell us, we knew there was another way. We might not have chosen to do it. We might not have chosen to live that way, but we always knew there was another way because you showed us that. And so I look at it and say that it was very successful in what we did, even though maybe, it's not ideal or it's not perfect, but they all know that there's another way to live.
Yeah, you obviously made a huge impact because I just wish there were more people like you and your husband, because there are not enough foster parents and not enough good foster parents. And that's true all the way across the country.
It most definitely. I mean, the numbers, and I haven't even looked at the most recent, were what? There's over 500,000 foster kids. And
yeah, they're saying now close to 650,000, mostly because of the opioid crisis. So, right. So it's not just in the urban areas where it's always been very high, but in the hills of Tennessee, Vermont, Kentucky.
Arkansas.
Arkansas, yeah. So I ask this one thing of all of my guests, and I'm curious what you're going to say. What is the one thing about you that no one would ever guess unless you told them? Is there something about you that nobody would know? They will hear it now, by the way.
Well, that's a tough one. It's funny because I was thinking, when I was in high school, I had made the comment, and I can't even remember why, but I remember making this comment that someday I will have 12 adopted children. So that, I don't know if it was a vision of the future or it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. So that was one thing, but
Wow.
I know.
I don't know any high schooler that would say that. By the way, I'm going to have 12 adopted children. Yeah.
I know. It's so crazy. But I think if there's one thing deep down in my heart, I would love to write a book. And not about my experiences necessarily as a foster parent, maybe bringing some of it into, but a fiction, some type of fictional book. And I don't share that with too many people. So now you all know.
You just put it out in the world, and it happens. You're talking to a writer, and that absolutely. And there are other people that are listening to this podcast that are going to say that woman has a good book in her. I can tell you that you have a good book in you, whether it's nonfiction or fiction.
I think that so very, very, very few people know that deep secret. I don't even think my own kids know it.
Right. that you have this writer inside you that is dying to put words to the page to express yourself.
Exactly. I read continually. I'm a big reader, and I've always thought I would just love to write. It's fears that hold me back. So of just, well, what if it's not very good? And I know that doesn't matter, but that's the human side. If you feel like you got to write, you need to write.
Well, you just put it out in the world, so it's obviously going to happen. It's going to be the same thing as, I'm going to adopt 12 children when I'm older. And now you just said, I'm going to write a book.
Yeah, it's true.
I want to thank you so much for what you and your husband have done. It's a huge contribution to society, to youth and care, to humanity in general. And my hat's off to you. It's really admirable.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for what you're doing here with Bonus Babies, getting the word out there to people. I know I appreciate that as well, having the background I do, but what you're doing too, just letting people know. Help.
Yeah, I want people to know.
Help.
Help. Okay, thank you so much, Deena.
Thank you, Jayne Amelia.
Thank you, Deena, for your time and sharing your incredible story with us. You really are very inspiring. In our next episode, Jayne Amelia speaks with Melanie Velasquez. Melanie is a former foster youth and survivor of human trafficking. She was abused at a very early age, was in and out of foster care, and because of this trauma, she was vulnerable to the lure of sex trafficking. And after some time spent in that world, she was ironically liberated by one of her clients. Thank you for listening, and be well. If you see something, say something. If you suspect a child's health or safety is jeopardized in any way by parents or anyone else, contact the Child Protective Services Agency in your county. 24-hour hotlines are staffed by trained social workers who will help you through the process, and you can do so anonymously. In California, you can call the Child Protection Hotline at 800-540-4000. So if you see something, say something. You might be saving a child's life. If you want to know more about becoming a CASA anywhere in the country, go to nationalcasagal.org, and in LA, casala.org. And if you want to know more about becoming a foster parent, check out the National Foster Parent Association at nfponline.org. There's also faithfosterfamilies.org and adoptuskids.org. There's tons of other information online as well, so you can just hunt around. We also want to thank the supremely talented Christina Apostolopoulos for her beautiful original music. You can find her music on Spotify or Instagram at Christina Aposto. And also thank you to Yukon Har for his engineering. Thanks for listening, and if you like what you hear and you find it as valuable as we do, please rate us and hit subscribe. You can also make a donation at BonusBabies.com. See you next time.